Okay, so we're going to meditate for about 5 minutes. Watch your breath. Go to the golden room. Just the brightness of the gold will prevent subtle dullness. Look out the window at the sky, deep blue sky. That expansiveness prevents the inward turning of the mind, which can bring on agitation, subtle agitation. Look at the wide expanse of the valley and the mountains beyond. You come back to the golden room and ask your heart teacher to come. Gaze up into their eyes. Hold their eyes with your eyes. There's no reason to think or look at anything else. Just stay there, happily contented, relaxed, happy. if your mind wanders, use your shishin to catch it. Use your jemba to bring it back. And try to watch them doing it, so that you can get used to them and use them more consciously. Come back to this room and relax. Open your eyes. So he says, Pumbo Ninang Tsu Deta Dun Tang Ne Drupe Chi Yin Lola Tade Dun Nangi Mepa Dang. If Nick were just, you can't move, okay? I mean, you can't sit in a different place. If Nick were just one, right? And again, over the centuries, the one, is he one or many? Normally, he's just one, right? And over the centuries, they've come to say, oh, Nick's just one. But what it meant more specifically in the olden days was, is Nick the parts that make up Nick, or is Nick the sum total of them? The one thing which is the sum total of them, okay? And we're going to work on the sum total of them, okay? Yewa tade tenmeki chi yin ge, okay? Then if he were one, if Nick were one, he could never appear to be separate things, right? Okay. Tare de nangi mepatang. Yewa tade temeki chi yingu. So then he would have to be a one without divisions, which gets into a question, you see. He's a paradox. Nick is a paradox. Why? We talked about it in Phoenix. You can't see Nick unless you know how they tie people down to a chair and they track how their eyes track an object, and their eyes, human eyes are going like this all the time. And what they're doing is, to see Nick, you have to see a couple of indicators of Nick. Okay, you can't. You need to. You check the beard, but there's some other people with beards, and then you check the eyes, and you knew the eyes. The eyes are not the same, so those. And then he's wearing a certain T-shirt, and the other person's not. And so to determine he's not another guy with a beard in the room, your eyes have to go like this, and you have to pick up different indicators of Nick. So we can say that you can't see Nick without moving around to different parts of Nick. It's not possible. You can't just be seeing the whole Nick, because you wouldn't recognize who he was. You have to check out indicators, and then based on that you decide it's Nick. But you also can't, so you can't see the whole nick if you don't look at the indicators. But when you look at indicators, you're not looking at a whole nick. All right? So there's a contradiction going on. And that's what emptiness meditations or emptiness lines of reasoning are meant to point out the paradox of how we do things. You know, like it's actually not possible that you're seeing nick. Okay? In the way you think you are, it's not possible. Okay? If he were out there, and if it were true that I have to see his parts of him to identify who he is, I can't see all the parts at once. When I look at his hands, I can't look at his eyes. When I look at his eyes, I can't look at his ears. And then I can't look at them all together. The fact that I think I'm seeing a whole nick is itself a gakcha. Okay? The whole nick that I think I see is a gakcha. There can't be a whole nick out. It looks like there's a whole nick out there, but there can't be. Because if I wasn't moving around to different parts of him, I couldn't identify him. And if I stuck with the whole, I couldn't look at his parts, so I couldn't identify him. So if you look at the parts to identify him, you can't identify him. If you look at the whole, you could never identify him anyway. So what you think you're doing is impossible. And that's all proofs of, these are different ways of proving emptiness. Okay? You can't see Nick without looking at his parts. When you're looking at the parts, you can't see Nick either. Because you're looking at the parts of Nick. Okay? So what you're doing is impossible. So what's really happening? Let me describe what's really happening and you'll feel more comfortable. There's a stage in your career, there's a stage in your meditative career and your spiritual career. There are 5 classical stages in your spiritual career. Okay? And they are reflected in the mantra Jedi Jedi Bolo Jedi Bolo San Jedi Bolo Saha, okay, in Chinese. Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva in Sanskrit. Okay? And the second one is important, okay? At the end of the second level of realization, okay? At the end of the second level, you answer the Nick question. Okay? How you're perceiving Nick, okay? There's an experience, you have an experience. So I'll describe it, okay? I've described it many times before, I'll do it again. So you're living with your lama, you're their cook, etc., which is proper, okay? And that's how it goes. And then, so you've been studying really hard, especially Chikdudel, which is this subject. Sorry, Chichedak. Chichedak, which is not this subject. But it is this subject, because how do you see, how would you say it, qualities and those things which are characteristic of those qualities. So for example, yellow and things which possess yellow. Okay, how do you see those things? Chicheda. And you've been serving other people a lot. And you've been meditating hard and you're up to the 9th level. 9 plus, okay? So all of those conditions are there. And then you go to make your lama a cup of tea. Right? You're just standing there in front of the stove, make a cup of tea. In Zen, they call it satori, I think. But there's a debate about it, okay? And I'll talk about that. But anyway, you're standing in front of the stove. You're looking at a pot on the stove. And because of all that good stuff you've been doing, okay, meditating, serving your teacher, helping old people, studying hard, meditating really hard, regular practice. Because of all those factors, suddenly you realize that the pot on the stove is a tiny little picture in the back of your mind. Okay? I mean, you're looking at the stove, you're looking at the pot, and then you realize you're not looking at a pot out there. You're watching a tiny image of a pot in your mind. Okay? And what's out there is just some indicators of a pot. Okay? Like you can't see a whole pot out there. You never can see a whole pot anyway, right? The back of the pot might be a watermelon. You don't know, right? You only see the front half. but your mind synthesizes a nice full thing. In your mind's eye, you see a whole pot. So anyway, you're looking at this thing on the stove. You realize it only was ever some round silver and some straight black. Okay? Because the eyes cannot see anything else than shapes and colors. The eyes cannot interpret an object. You see? Your cones and rods can only detect colors and shapes. Okay? So you can't see a pot. There's no such thing. You can't see a pot because your eye faculty, the cones and rods in the back of your eye cannot make decisions. They can just change according to whether colors are presented to them or shapes are presented to them. So technically all you're really seeing is round silver, black straight. Okay? And then you in that moment of deep realization, you catch your mind making an image, an impossibly perfect image of a pot, and laying it down on the straight black and the silver round. Okay, it's overlaying it like, what do you call those things? When you project it on the wall. Overhead projector, help me, just say, yeah, transparency. Okay, so it's like your mind is placing a transparency of a pot over the straight stick and the round, it's not a stick, sorry. Straight black and round silver, okay? And that's all. And then within that day you see emptiness directly. Those things happen on the same day. Okay? So what all this book is trying to describe is that Nick can't be the way you think he is. Okay? If you saw Nick by looking at his parts, you couldn't see the whole Nick. If you can only see Nick by looking at his parts, then you can't see the whole Nick. But if you look at a whole Nick, you can't see his parts to identify him. What you're doing is not possible. He's not there. There's an image, being a small, bright, luminous image is in the back of your mind, and you are overlaying it on some part. Okay? And it's impossibly perfect. Then you start the you go to the direct perception of emptiness, which is the third of the 5 paths. Then you go into the gomlam, which means getting used to what you saw. And that can take 7 lifetimes. That typically could take 500 years. And then during that time, you struggle with the applications of what you saw to real life. You see what I mean? How can I apply, okay, so Nick is just a luminous little picture in the back of my mind, overlaid on some straight black and round silver. So how am I supposed to use that to help the world? How am I supposed to save the world with that? You see, and then Gomlam, which takes up to 490 years, you are struggling with this question. Okay? And I guess the first progress you make is asking yourself, where did the luminous picture come from? Why am I having that luminous picture? You see what I mean? Why did I see a silver pot? Why did my mind choose to make a silver pot from the round silver and the black straight? Okay? And then you start appreciating karmic seeds, mental seeds. You get more and more sophisticated about understanding mental seeds. And then in time, that removes your mental afflictions completely. Okay? Why? You realize the people who are screaming at you are coming from you. Then you don't scream back. And then there's no more bad stuff in your life and you reach nirvana. Okay? Basically. Right? No, because you don't respond anymore the way you used to. Because you realize it's a picture coming from you. And that if you don't like it, you have to stop doing it. Okay? So that's all. That's Bodhisattva. Then you get enlightened and all that. Tare de nangi me patang. So he's discussing, the whole next few pages are discussing, is Nick the whole thing, right? Or is he the individual part? If he's the whole thing, I couldn't perceive him because I can only do that by looking at its individual parts. If he's his individual parts, I would never get to the whole thing. Got it? Okay. So, if he was the whole thing, we used to say zechi la dobtade, right? Yeah, that was all the words I ever learned. I learned from Rinpoche by being his driver and his dishwasher. People thought I was stupid, spending 10 years driving and washing dishes. But he was like my dictionary. I never had a dictionary, And I would say, what's zechik dobtade mean, Rinpoche? We were in a 7-Eleven, okay? We were in a convenience store. I said, Rinpoche, there's this weird phrase in the Madhyamika text. Zechik dobtade, what's that mean? And he looks around and he says, you got it right here. I said, what do you mean? Zechik means one substance. And dobtade means different manifestations. And he says, look, all the crap in this store. You got Twinkies, you got cupcakes, you got cherry pies, you got, everything is the same sugar, flour, and water in different manifestations. It's all the same stuff, exactly the same stuff, with slightly different flavoring, but it's all the same unhealthy stuff in different packages and different shapes, and that's it. Zechik means same stuff. Dopatade means different manifestations of the same, you could say manifestations of the same stuff. Okay? So here it is in the scripture. Okay? Ngo jikla dopatade. Is he just one thing appearing in different ways? Okay? Is he just one thing appearing in different ways? Meaning, then we get to that part about Netzel den Nanso Mitumba, which means, is he appearing to be many when in fact he is one? Okay? And if that were true, then he can't be real. Okay? If he were appearing as many when in fact he were one, then he couldn't be real in the way because real means what? I left you with that. Real means the way he appears and the way he is match. And when they don't match, that means he's unreal. Okay? So if he were Zechik Dobotade, okay? If he were one Nik, with different parts of Nik appearing as an arm, okay? If Nik were one, but different parts of Nik were appearing as Nik's arm or Nik's head or Nik's feet, right? Then the appearance of a whole and the appearance of multiplicity and the reality of and the actuality of a singularity would be a contradiction, and that's not real because that contradicts the meaning of real, the definition of real. I'll say it again. If there were just one Nik, and then I had to check his parts to find him, then in a sense, the one Nik is appearing through each of his parts, right? In which case, the reality of Nik would be singular, one Nik. But he would be expressing himself as multiple parts of Nik. Okay? In that case, the way he appears to me as multiple Niks, and the way he really is, one basic Nik substance, would be contradictory. And then he would become unreal. And then that's not real. Okay? And the other guy's trying to say Nik is real. All right? Okay. Awesome. Demba Drupala Denda Milungshin Nangso Dal Netsu Tunga. If something existed in reality, then the way it appears and the way it is should match. Detana Dakilamba Duned Gyurte. And if that were the case, if Nik were, if Nik were the whole, okay? If Nik were the whole, then it would be meaningless to talk about Nik. Okay? Why? Daki Pumbashe Jetse Pumbu Pumbudam. Then when you said Nik's body and mind, it would be the equivalent of saying the body and mind of the body and mind. Okay? There's Nick's body and there's Nick's mind. Okay, I'm using body and mind for the 5 skandhas because it's too complicated. But that's what it means. Okay? There's Nick's body and there's Nick's mind. Do we have the genitive expression apostrophe S, Nick's body and Nick's mind, right? That would imply that Nick is separate from them because he possesses them. Okay, so there must be a separate Nick who's the owner of the body and who owns the mind because you use an apostrophe S. Okay, Nick's body and Nick's mind. So Nick must be someone other than the body and mind. Okay? No, and then you could say he's the whole. Nick as a whole possesses the parts, Nick's body and Nick's mind. Right? But if Nick were his parts, then when you said Nick's body and Nick's mind, you would be saying body's body and mind's mind. Okay? Is he related to his parts? Is Nick related to his parts? Yes. Can we think of Nick as a big thing that possesses his parts? Yeah. Is that thing separate from the parts or one with the parts? Is the big Nick separate from the parts of Nick or is he the same as the parts of Nick? Because if he's the same as the parts of Nick, he's multiple. Then he's like schizophrenic. Then there's all kinds of Nicks running around. Okay? All right? You're getting confused and you think I'm just blabbing. But what I'm trying to point out is that what you think he is wrong. It's not, the way you think of Nick is not possible. You think there's one big Nick who possesses his body and possesses his mind. But at the same time, you can't say he's separate from his body and his mind. He is his body and his mind. So what you're saying is, when you say Nick's body, you're saying Nick's Nick. And it's a contradiction. It's crazy. You can't say Nick's mind and Nick's body, because Nick is his body and his mind. Okay? Okay? All right. What you're doing is impossible, and that's a proof that you're doing something wrong. Okay? Okay. Daki Krishna. Daki dakche jobadan keme de gyur. So then he says, to say Nick's body and Nick's Nick would be the same thing. Okay. All right. Me tu gyurwe. Daktan daki pumboshe soso jopa dun me ching. Then it would become meaningless to draw a distinction between Nick and Nick's body. If Nick's body were Nick, it'd be meaningless to talk about Nick and Nick's body. If Nick's body wasn't Nick, then where else is Nick? Okay? Okay. Then they quote Arya Nagarjuna. So Nagarjuna is a real Arya, and I think the proof of it is that the book he wrote was 7 pages long. And it's just these weird statements, It's just weird, impossible statements that sound bizarre to us. Because we're bizarre. Okay? So here's one of them. Which is a good time to go back. Can you fire up that confuser? Just fire it up in the hand. You don't have to plug it in. I left a couple paragraphs at the end of Phoenix, okay, which we skipped. And I just want to get them to you. I want to make sure you have them. All right. Basically, they just talk about how lucky we are that there were at least 2 or 3 Aryas in history so that we have somebody to ask about what is emptiness. Because if it weren't for having a few people around who had seen emptiness directly, you could imagine how weird these books would be. Okay? I mean, if someone didn't really know what it meant, what happens historically is there comes an Arya, they make statements, and then people who are not Aryas repeat them to other people, and they get mixed up. And then another Arya comes along in about 700 years and straightens it out. And then, you see, and then the whole thing happens again. Okay, so he's about to quote Nagarjuna, who is an Arya. And I wanted to, what we did in Phoenix, we got to a part in the text in the beginning of the emptiness section where he just said, thank goodness we've had a few Aryas in history to straighten things out for us. Okay? Like and I left a few sentences out of there, and I just wanted to give it to you. So just for a historical record, so you can get it into the right place, this is page 365A, which is slightly before what we started with here. Dena samudun selwe gongdelana mepani. Therefore, the unmatched explanation of the true thought, which clarifies that most profound object, meaning emptiness, okay? And the author, Pabongka Rinpoche, is making a pun and a joke, because he said the best book which clarifies the true thought of that deep thing, that's the name of Je Tsongkapa's most famous book on emptiness. He wove the name into a phrase as a joke, okay? And then he says, Je Dagni Chembelekshe Dinamyun. The works of Tsongkapa are the ultimate means of clarifying the meaning of emptiness, okay? But that's actually the name of one of his best books. Je Di Pagyuki Tenju Yin Se Nangne Tawa Tenla Bepe Shung Shen Pelcher La Tsema Mit Zepar. Je Tsongkapa went through, there are 3,000 different books in the canon from ancient India, commentaries. There are 1,500 sutras and tantras spoken by Lord Buddha. We still have 1,500 sutras and tantras spoken by Lord Buddha in Tibetan translation. And they don't exist in the Sanskrit anymore, maybe 10%, due to the Mughal invasion of India. Okay. Then we have about 3,000 commentaries upon them from ancient India, okay, over the period of 15 centuries. So we have those books. We have those two, Kangyur and Tengyur. These are the two great canons. Je Tsongkapa studied the entire Tengyur. He went through the whole body of 3,000 commentaries from India, trying to find a good explanation of emptiness. Okay? And then what he found out was Yin Se Nangne Tawaten Labobe Shung Shen Pelche La Tsema Min Zepar. He couldn't find almost any that he felt were tsema, which means what? Pamana, which means correct. Jairangi Yidam Jampayana Kandi Shupana. Then he asked his Yidam. Okay, Yidam means like a guardian angel. Okay, Yidam means a guardian angel. So he went to the boss. He was confused. He went to thousands of books and he said, I can't really get a good explanation of emptiness here. So he did what everybody should learn to do. He asked his guardian angel. He worked to find a guardian angel. The first book ever written by Tsongkapa is a praise of Saraswati, a goddess of music and poetry. And he made contact with her. And then he would ask her things, So the whole thing is a lot easier if you just find a guardian angel, okay? And you just ask them questions, and then the whole thing is easier. So he went to his guardian angel, who was Yidam Manjushri, right? Kandi Shu. Then he said, I have a problem. I'm trying to understand emptiness, and I don't feel that any of these books is really accurate. Okay? You're talking the Tengyur. Okay? Jampel Ki, J. Lamar, Manjushri said to Je Tsongkapa, Dawa Trapani Sangeki Shinkam Shigne. There's this dude named Chandrakirti. Okay? There's somebody named Chandrakirti. All right? He lives in a Buddha paradise. Satumba Chanchu Sempa Namchu Nyingtop Chenshi. He is a very high level bodhisattva, and he's capable of undertaking. He acts out the deeds of all the bodhisattvas. He is of great courage, which is also, by the way, a pun because that was a name of the Buddha in olden times. Nyingtop Chen. When the Buddha gave his life to the tigress and her cubs, he was called Nyingtop Chen. So it's a big. He's not just saying he was courageous. He's making an illusion. Nyingtop Chen shi gumbo luduki samotar temba pelchir. This bodhisattva will appear on this earth to explain the words of Nagarjuna. Okay? He will clarify what Nagarjuna meant. Like 500 years after Nagarjuna. Okay? Samotar temba pelchir. Samshin jimba yimbe. And he has come to your world just to do that. He came to your world just to clarify that. Then those commentaries you can trust. Okay, you can trust Master Chandrakirti. That's his Yidam, his guardian angel, giving him advice. You can trust. Find the books of Chandrakirti, you can trust them. Okay. And therefore, ever after, Je Tsongkapa took the books of Master Chandrakirti and his heart teacher, right? Manjushri, his guardian angel. He took them as being tsema, pramana, truth. Okay, truth. Je Tsongkapa kortembe shungnamba rangchaki tuesamso jepe tsegoka. When people like us, guys, he uses the rangchak, okay? When people are like us, when we are struggling to learn about emptiness, we open the works of Tsongkapa and his lineage, right? And Goka. When we try to learn them, they are difficult. They're difficult to crack. Okay? Gokashin, Tokawa. It's difficult to figure out what they mean. Junga, Shung Hajang Lingshin Sabune. These books are, lingua means, what do you call it? Unfathomable. How's that? Unfathomable. Ling can also mean depth of the ocean. Okay? So it's a very, very rare word. Okay? So they are lingua and samo, profound. Therefore, they are not easily understood. But, okay, you know what he's going to say. But, but if you spend time with them and you keep trying to chip away at them, okay, you will discover jewels of understanding that you won't find anywhere else. Okay, so you call it, confront these explanations and don't run away from them. They're hard, and crack them and keep chipping away. We have this thing in America, or I don't know, in English. I don't know, when I grew up, I never read a book twice. I mean, when you're a child or a young person in America, when I was growing up, you read a book, and if you understood it, you got A's in school. And if you didn't understand it so much, you got C's. But they didn't ask you to keep reading it over and over. You know what I mean? And so my relationship with books was like my relationship with movies. I never see a movie twice, except Gandhi. Or, Date with an Angel. But that's a different thing. It's a great, anyway. That's a Yidam movie. That's a Guardian Angel movie. But, normally I grok a whole movie after I see it once. I don't feel like I have to see it again because it's not worth it. It's not worth the time. But a Tsongkapa book is a different thing. You can't relate to it in a single sitting. There's no such thing. You can spend the rest of your life rereading it And you will keep finding new things that you didn't understand before. It's like layer upon layer upon layer. Okay? People ask me, you want to go to the bookstore, Geshe MIchael? I say, no. And they say, I thought you liked book. I said, yes, but I have Tsongkapa. And then they say, oh, you're just being sectarian or something. Or, you're just being, And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You can read Tsongkapa for the rest of your life. You can read one book of Tsongkapa for the rest of your life. And it suffices. Everything you want is there. So anyway, I just drink hot chocolate. He knows. I drink hot chocolate. He goes looks at books. But he's got this manga thing. Yeah, okay. Manga I might look at. Okay. Sakat and Sabke Kepa Chen Duma Yebe. Tongni la tu jungi sheram so kirim rimshin koa ter tsap shenle chewa ong. The sup is a very rare word, and it means it's not the sup and geld sup. It has a different spelling. Sup means like almost mystical firepower. There's no English word. Mystical firepower. Tsongkapa's books have mystical firepower, which can bring you understandings of emptiness that you can't get anywhere else. Okay, so that completes a section which I didn't finish in Phoenix from before. Okay, from up above. Why did I say that? Because he's about to quote Nagarjuna. Okay, Arya Nagarjuna.